Okay, Miles. The next book is another one by Stephen Kellogg, and you know that's Uncle Ben's favorite. This one's called Paul Bunyan. He is super, super big. He's a big guy. Paul Bunyan, A Tall Tale, retold and illustrated by Stephen Kellogg. And we know that tall tales are things that are not quite true. It's like they had an idea and they made it even bigger. And when you come to visit Grandma, we'll look at this really close. There's so many little things happening in the art that you might not be able to see from on the iPad or the phone. The Bunyans welcome Paul, born July 4th at 6:25, weight 156 pounds. See, he was huge when he was born. Look at how big he is. He's bigger than his mama and daddy. So if he's a huge baby, then how big will he get when he's a grown-up? And then look around. If you were here, we would count the cats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's only getting started. Lots and lots of cats. And you notice the grumpy ladies over here? Why do you suppose that is? I think you'll figure it out as we go. Oh, there's the paint for the sign, yeah. He did a nice job on all the cow and the grass. Paul Bunyan, A Tall Tale, retold and illustrated. Lots of cats. For my heroic nephew, Steve. Look at the baby. He's as tall as the cow and he's outside in his diaper. Look how big the bed is. And all the cats. Paul Bunyan was the largest, smartest, and strongest baby ever born in the state of Maine. He's milking with one hand and holding the cow up with the other. Kitties like milk. Even before he learned to talk, Paul showed an interest in the family logging business. He took the lumber wagon and wandered through the neighborhood collecting trees. Now you know why the ladies were unhappy. The sign says, "Trespassers will not be tolerated. This orchard is the property of Miss Anna and Miss Hannah," I don't know, Screech maybe? His apple trees are beautiful. But you know, it's not nice for Paul to pick the apple tree up by and one. Oh, look. And when he picks this tree up, it smashes this house, and this lady's unhappy. Oh, my goodness. There were so many complaints about Paul's visits that his parents anchored his cradle in the harbor. It's anchored like you would a boat. So there's a boat, and there's his cradle. All was well until Paul started rocking the cradle and stirring up waves. Rocking the cradle and stirring up waves. After his parents had paid for the damage, they decided they better move to the backwoods where life would be more peaceful. So when the water got going, swish, 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 the boats crashed. People in boats. Here's the roof right here. Here. And the boat is way up here. Oh my goodness. Water went everywhere. That Stephen Kellogg can sure do some cool drawings. Paul loved his new wilderness home. He soon grew into a sturdy lad who was so quick on his feet that he could blow out a candle and leap into bed before the room became dark. That's pretty speedy. Every day he joined his forest friends in their sports. He raced with a deer and he wrestled with the grizzlies. Is he wrestling with a grizzly? One morning, Paul woke to find the world under a blanket of blue snow. He heard a moan from inside a snowdrift, and there he found a shivering ox calf. Paul adopted him and named him Babe. Both Paul and Babe began growing at an astonishing rate, but the ox never lost the color of the storm from which he'd been rescued. He's still blue, even when he got big. As the years passed, the two of them proved to be extremely helpful in the family business. I bet he eats a lot. At 17, Paul grew a fine beard, which he combed with the top of a pine tree. By this time, other settlers were beginning to crowd into the Maine woods. Paul felt an urge to move on. He said goodbye to his parents and he headed west. Paul wanted to cross the country with the best lumbering crew available. He hired Ole, a celebrated blacksmith, and two famous cooks, Sourdough Slim and Cream Puff Fatty. Then he signed up legendary lumbermen like Big Tom Burr, Hardjaw Murphy, and the 7 Hackett brothers. 7 Hackett brothers are all standing on each other's shoulders. It's going to be all chopped into bits. Oh my. Pancakes on his head. Paul put the camp buildings on wheels so that Babe could haul them from one forest to another, and as soon as he had cleared the land, pioneers moved in to set up farms and villages. On the far slopes of the Appalachian Mountains, several of Paul's men were ambushed by a gang of underground ogres called gumbaroos. Paul grabbed the camp dinner horn and blew a thunderous note into the gumbaroos' cave, determined to blast the meanness right out of them. I see hands right here grabbing this one guy who is trying to use the saw. This is a huge, big saw they used to have before chainsaws. Oh my. To Paul's dismay, the gumbaroos responded by snatching the entire crew. A wild, rough and tumble rumpus began inside the den. So you can see, now this is a picture that would be fun to see close up. So there's a guy here, a gumbaroo. And then you can see all these hands and feet, and there's a guy right here. He looks like the cook. There's the blue ox, and there's more gumbaroos. You see what I mean? There's just like lots and lots of pictures. A wild, rough and tumble rumpus began inside the den. When that historic hustle was over, the gumbaroos needed 6 weeks to untangle themselves. Do you think Paul Bunyan tied them up in knots? Oh my goodness. They disappeared into the depths of the earth and they've never been heard of since. Paul's next job was to clear the heavily forested Midwest. He hired armies of extra woodsmen and built enormous new bunkhouses. The men sailed up to bed in balloons and parachuted down to breakfast in the morning. Unfortunately, the cooks couldn't flip flapjacks fast enough to satisfy all the newcomers. You can see how there's people sleeping way up here. Parachutes. Look how many people. Please form a single line. Please stay in line. To solve the muddle, Paul built a colossal flapjack griddle. The surface was greased by kitchen helpers with slabs of bacon laced to their feet. So if they want grease on the griddle to make the pancakes not stick, bacon is on their feet. Wood goes in here to make it hot. Huge griddle. Even if they're trying to it looks more like a hockey game with brooms and mops. Who's gonna win, the brooms or the mops? Where's the pancakes? Oh, here. Every time the hot griddle was flooded with batter, it blasted a delicious flapjack high above the clouds. Usually the flapjacks landed neatly beside the griddle, but sometimes they were a bit off target. I guess so. One's on top of a buffalo. One's on top of a building. Oh, on that house too. Paul took a few days off to dig the St. Lawrence River and the Great Lakes so that the barges of Vermont maple syrup could be brought to camp. Grandma lives by the Great Lakes, and your daddy lives in Vermont. Fueled by the powerful mixture of flapjacks and syrup, the men leveled the Great Plains and shaved the slopes of the Rocky Mountains. They probably would have sawed the peaks themselves into logs if a blizzard hadn't suddenly buried the entire mountain range. That blizzard continued for several years, snuffing out the springs and summers and autumns. The crew burrowed into their bunkhouses and hibernated. Babe became so depressed that Paul asked Ole to make a pair of sunglasses for his friend. When Babe saw the world colored green, see, they made green ones, he thought he'd stumbled into a field of clover. He began eating the snow with such gusto that soon the treetops appeared. Look at all these cold guys sleeping. Look, he's making glasses that are so big. Oh. At that point, all these pent-up springtimes finally exploded, dissolving the storm clouds and the remaining snow. Paul and his friends invited some newly arrived settlers to join them in a celebration of all the holidays that had been missed. All the holidays. I see a turkey. I see a Christmas tree. What else do you see? Getting a haircut. That's a good idea. I see some Valentines. Oh, here's their Halloween costumes. Well, they're catching up, aren't they? After the festival, the lumberjacks continued their journey. But as they headed southwest, the blustering sun and the giant Texas varmints proved to be more of a problem than they had expected. Can you see with this really long, right here? Ooh. Travel became so difficult that some of the men began to speak longingly of being buried in a blizzard or bear-hugged by a gumbaroo. Yeah, this looks like a harder thing, doesn't it? Too hot, too thirsty, and the snakes, oh dear. While crossing Arizona, the griddle curled up like a burned leaf and the batter evaporated. Deprived of their flapjacks, the lumberman became weak and discouraged. Paul's great axe fell from his shoulder, gouging a jagged trench, which today is known as the Grand Canyon. Disaster seemed certain until Paul came up with a desperate plan. He headed east and found a family that could sell him a barn filled with corn. Babe galloped it back across the desert. When the flaming sunrise hit that barn, it exploded, and the lumbermen woke to find themselves in a raging blizzard of popcorn. Dizzy with joy, they pulled on their mitts and began blasting each other with popcorn balls. If there was a lot of popcorn in a barn, would it just all pop at once? Look at that. A westerly wind kept the cooling clouds of popcorn swirling around Paul and his crew until they crossed California and reached the Pacific Ocean. Whoa, look at that big whale. And there's the blue ox right there with his sunglasses on. After he had crossed the country, some say that Paul gave up lumbering and rambled north, searching for new areas of untouched wilderness. With passing years, Paul has been seen less and less frequently. However, along with his unusual size and strength, he seems to possess an extraordinary longevity. Sometimes his great bursts of laughter can be heard rumbling like distant thunder across the wild Alaskan mountain ranges where he and Babe still roam. You see the eagles right here? That is a fun book. Ooh, and this is the whole United States. Grandma lives here. Here, Nana lives up in this area. And Miles lives, whoops, Miles lives way over here. And you can see there's a picture for all the different places he went. Arizona where it was hot, there's the whale. North is up, south is down. Cleared by Paul Bunyan and Babe. The great blizzard was over and out here. Oh, Miles, it's going to be so fun to see you again someday. I love you. I gotta climb on the chair to turn this off. Oh, I wonder if it's been sideways all this time.